Okay, next up we have David Burck, who's making his way hopefully to, yes, here he comes, from Queensland, joining us today in Melbourne. So David is a domestic violence child and youth counsellor at YFS in Jimboomba. He's also completing his PhD at the University of Queensland, and today he's going to be presenting some preliminary themes emerging from his research with young people using violence in the home. Having interviewed young people themselves, David says that this gives us a chance to hear the voices of the child when considering programs and approaches we might use. Let's welcome David. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put that down. I'm from America, so my voice is pretty loud anyway, but I think the mic will be okay. So before I get into this, just to give some context, so I've been working with young people who both witnessed domestic violence and young people using violence in the home for about 10 years. I wrote a group program that was similar to the previous program that worked with mothers and young people who've witnessed domestic violence and young people using violence in the home that ran for 20 weeks as well. So I have, but I'm going to talk mainly about the research today. So I have a foot in both practice and in research. So I'll just do, yep. So I'd like to acknowledge traditional owners of the land we meet today, pay respects to elders past, present, and future. And I guess the one thing is when I was looking at doing a program for kids who were using violence in the home, about 7 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot of research out there with the voices of young people. There was a lot of descriptions of behavior, there's a lot of theories, but there wasn't a lot of what are the young people saying. So when we were making a program, it's like, well, what's going on? Like, what's the dynamic? Like, we just can't make a group that says don't yell at mom anymore, because that's not really that effective. So what's happening? So that's what I wanted to do. So I decided to take on a PhD, which I highly do not recommend, but, or if you do it, please don't do it with an at-risk group that uses violence. Can I suggest that? But so the PhD, basically, the core aim was to understand the lived experience for adolescent violence in the home. So the focus was on mothers and young people who experienced domestic violence from either boyfriend or dad in the past, and currently or recently was about a year or two removed, experienced adolescent to parent violence. So, and all the participants were either engaged in a counselor or some other service. And that was mainly an ethical consideration because it was an at-risk group, that if they disclosed something, self-harm, suicidal ideation, violence at home, I would then could feed that through to their support worker for them to get support. So like I said, the core aim was around this lived experience. This is a sample. So I interviewed, these were all face-to-face interviews that lasted about 60 minutes to 45 minutes. 15 mothers experiencing or experienced violence from the young people, also experienced domestic violence. And the young people, so I interviewed 5 girls ages 12 to 17 and 5 boys ages 12 to 17, and all of them were currently using violence at home. One of them had to take a train to the interview because she got kicked out of home the week before for violence she was using. She still came to the interview though, which was nice. And the young people and the moms were not from the same family. So the one thing this can't comment on is if the young people were minimizing their violence use, because I didn't interview their moms, so I didn't know if they were or not. I mean, research suggests that they do, but I just can't say that. And the reason for that was around coercion. So we wanted to avoid the young person saying, well, don't tell Dave this in their interview, or vice versa. So to limit coercion, we did that. Also, that's not on there, is that all the mothers and young people, the adult perpetrators, like dad, boyfriend, was no longer in the home. And the reason for that was safety, because he probably wouldn't be happy if they're like, can't wait to go to that, DV interview. He probably wouldn't allow that. So that was around risk that we decided not to do that. So preliminary themes. So today, I'm just going to talk about 5 themes basically because I think they're most pertinent to service use, and you'll find them useful. But there's like way more other themes. And it's only going to focus on young people since this symposium is around young people. I'm not going to talk about themes from the mothers. It's mainly just going to be themes from the young people. Like I said, there. And even though there were Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people involved in the interview, young people and mothers interviewed, and there were some young people interviewed that were like second generation from Africa and other things. This isn't going to comment on cultural factors because just there wasn't enough data to responsibly comment on any of that. So there's going to be a lot of cultural factors that aren't going to be included in this that'll have an impact on the violence at home that you will be aware of or talk to people about. All right, so what is violence? That's kind of important to know. So for the sake of this is violence that was reported by the young people. So when we say violence, quote unquote, it's sort of like all forms, if you think of power and control wheel, step up, for matter of fact, like Lily Anderson did wheel around abuse in the home, which is sort of similar. And it's looking at the violence that was identified was physical, verbal, destruction of property, financial, so that's usually, stealing money from mom, that sort of thing. Violence towards siblings and threats to kill. And those were all basic ones that were identified in the interviews. And this sort of gives you an idea. So these are what the young people were reporting. And then the bottom quote, when we're talking about minimization, that kind of comes across in that quote. Because in that interview, he said 2 previous times he didn't use physical violence at home. And then this is right before the end of the interview where he said, well, if he did, it wasn't on purpose. So it's just sort of, those are sort of the quotes that were coming through. Also, what's called instrumental violence. So in the research, this is violence that's used to gain a positive outcome for yourself. And the idea is that you're going to use it before you use it. So in the case of the young people, it would be like, I want to go out with my friend. If mom doesn't lit me, then I'll just yell at her until she does, or, that sort of construction. And so the main thing with this is undercutting mom's authority and agency within the family. So the young person is sort of seeing themselves as kind of, in control of the family, and mom's down here. And these are some of the quotes that kind of get that across. There was a lot of what Dominic was saying, like if it keeps going, I just ignore, that's it. There was a lot of young people saying, well, if mom just starts telling me something, I just walk out the door. Like I just don't listen. So this idea that they don't have to listen to boundaries. And I guess the bottom one is sort of more what we think of that classic sort of belief around instrumental violence. So, I've told her what I don't like and she doesn't do it. And that was, he was saying that in terms of looking at boundaries when I would ask, how is it like when mom sets a boundary? And this was his response. And so that's when we're looking at sort of that more instrumental violence use. So kids using violence to either have a positive outcome, not adhere to a boundary, something like that. And you could see in those quotes some of the beliefs around that. But also there's a great deal of shame. A lot of young people mention that when it gets brought up, if mom brings up the incident afterwards, like let's say it's an hour or so afterwards, the young people have sort of, the violence has gone down, that the young people will really escalate because they don't want to talk about it. I don't know if I have that quote, so I'll just say it. Another young person mentioned that she always is late to school in the morning because that's when mom will want to talk about something that happened the night before, and then she'll escalate. But she doesn't want friends to find out, so she keeps coming up with lies about why she's late for school. And she said in the interview she's getting worried because she thinks a lot of her friends are catching on and they know she's lying. So it's that idea of like no one knows. So they felt bad about what they did. They also noted they did not like being compared to dad. And that kind of comes out in some of the quotes, the idea that a lot of moms will say, oh, you're just like your dad. And those are really sort of triggering points for the young people. And the other thing is feeling really disconnected from their friends. There's also a high level of isolation in this group of young people. Yeah, we talked about that. So here's some of the quotes that get at that. Minnie sort of talks about being compared to Dad, to the point where she's called by her dad's name at home by, like, I think it was by siblings. And then Lily's sort of talking about the idea of not feeling normal. They feel very disconnected from their peer group, both because of the domestic violence that they experienced, but also because this was going on at home, which sort of Ariana gets at. Because like other people, they don't really fight that much with their mom. Like, as for me and Mom, we fight very often. So it's this idea that they're feeling disconnected from their peer group. Whether or not they've told their peer group about what's going on, a lot of young people felt that they have this thing going on at home that no one could know and that no one else does. So they were a very isolated group. And the title of the presentation came from Lily, where she said, knowing that they hurt their mom is really hard. So a lot of young people expressed that, the idea of knowing about what they were doing, they felt bad about that. Longing for attachment. This one's very interesting. I asked both the mothers and the young people if they had a magic wand and they could change anything they want about their relationship, how would it look like? And if I was to present to you both the responses from the mothers and the young people, but took all their names off it, you wouldn't be able to tell which one was from young people and which one was from mothers. They wanted exactly the same thing. And a lot of that is this attachment. Whoa, did I just do something wrong? Boo, boo, boo. Oh, no. Okay. So this is what Tanner said. It looked like this, having fun, spending time together. That's what he would wish for. This one I find the most interesting. So Christian actually took a bus to the interview because he was kicked out of home and was living with his mate and an older brother because of the violence that happened at home. Mom just kicked him out. And what he said when he came in is, on the face of it, you'd think, well, he would say no. I mean, he's a 17-year-old boy, gets to do whatever he wants. Like, living has no boundaries, really. And then he was always longing for when the family all lived together. So that's what he was saying, living with them, like all my family living together. He also said in the interview that with this disconnection or longing for attachment, he also talked about wanting that people should be close to their mom. He had this idea that you need to be close to your mom, and he wasn't close. So there was this interesting dynamic for him. And this is sort of coming up with the trauma stuff that people are talking about. So there's a lot of crossover, and I think what's confusing is that for a lot of the young people, their violence use objectively looks the same, but they're from different motivations. So some of those people were violent with the instrumental violence that we talked about before. Those beliefs around, I just use violence so I get what I want. If Mom puts in a boundary, I just increase the violence. If she puts in another one, I just increase the violence until she says, oh, go ahead, go out with your friends. Also, there's this violence coming home from either contact or from triggers that objectively looks the same, but comes from different motivations. And this sort of gets to that as well. There's a great deal of violence when there's domestic violence history, a great deal of violence use that's either protecting mom or protecting siblings. And so Roxy had the first quote where she was protecting her little brother from her dad. And then Dominic had the second quote where he would come in if he heard the violence getting too much with his mom, and he would actually get in physical fights with his dad, protecting his mom from him. And I guess this goes to one thing about the trauma they're experiencing and how in working with young people having a trauma-informed approach, because those would all lead to like different trauma symptomatologies and things like that. But also, it may lead to fathers being overrepresented. So the idea is that some research counts those the same as those instrumental beliefs around barriers. So if a young person gets in a fight with mom or pushes mom so they can go out with their friends, they'll count it the same as, say, Roxy, who maybe intervened to protect her brother. Now, we'd say they're both based on different motivations. However, some research counts it the same, because some research is only about instances of violence within the last 12 months, and they don't go into motivations at all. So what will happen is that fathers may get overrepresented, because there's a portion of that which is actually protective, but it doesn't look into that. So I just think that's worth mentioning. If you're looking into research and you're looking at rates, which are very sort of hard to get a handle on anyway, that may lead to fathers being overrepresented. Similarly, quotes like that, another theme that came out was the level of trauma these young people experience and how that might come out in contact with dad and things like that. Because I guess the other thing, I didn't put that in here, but the other thing to keep in mind from a service perspective is that if you're working with adolescent violence in the home and there's a history of domestic violence, there's a person usually that's not involved in the group if they're separated, but there's a person outside of your work that is actively trying to make your work fail, and that's dad. There are numerous moms that mentioned that contact was fueling the violence. So either on contact, dad would tell them to use violence at home, dad would text them, you don't have to listen to mom, things like that. Or like you've all experienced, mom might be, we need to save up for the Xbox, we'll save up, maybe we'll get one for Christmas, and they go to their dad's on contact, and dad has bought him 2 Xboxes and like use them as much as you want. And it's about undercutting mom's authority, which sort of leads to those instrumental violence beliefs. So that comes up in protecting mom, that comes up in trauma, and comes up in contact. So moving forward. So this is what Christian said, I suppose every kid should be close to his mom. And Minnie, it was interesting when people were talking about, when Kate was talking earlier about the surveys from mom, and mom's feeling like, oh, I've been hurt. It's similar with the young people. So that's when Minnie's sort of voice, I felt like I was alone, like I had no one to talk to. So the young people feel very isolated as well. Both the young people and the mothers kind of have a double stigma. In that with the mothers, they have the stigma around, my relationship failed because of the domestic violence, and now I'm failing as a mother because of the violence from my son or daughter. And similar to the young people, they kind of feel like, oh, I have this domestic violence I can't tell anyone about. But also there's this thing going on at home that I can't tell anybody about either. So they're a very isolated group, which is thinking about, well, how do we break that isolation? So some part of adolescents want to stop and have a healthy relationship with mom. So all the adolescents I interviewed wanted a better relationship in some way. None of them said, I don't care, who cares about mom? They all said they wanted, and they all said that they wanted to do very simplistic things, like watch a movie, eat dinner together, like very sort of basic attachment sort of activities. They're highly isolated, don't know how to get there. This is a highly isolated group. More so than young people who witness domestic violence. Like they are actively trying to hide what's going on at home. So from their peers, they're highly isolated. So how do we reach those young people? How do we get them engaged? And the bottom one is about breaking that isolation and supporting the need for attachment. So how do we leverage the goal that they have of wanting a better relationship while at the same time breaking through that isolation? And thank you.